Welcome everybody back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Breber, and alongside me is the one and only Logan Camden, and it is officially NFL season, boys and girls. The preseason is underway, which means our season preview content begins right here, right now, and we are going to start this preseason off with a banger of a list. It's summertime. That means it's list time here at Nerd Sesh. We are going to be ranking the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL. So, Logan, without further ado, before we get into the list itself, who was your toughest cut?
This was a very tough cut for me, Carson. I like this gentleman a lot. I still think he's going to play at a very high level next season. That's Aaron Rodgers. And just the reality of the situation, he's 40 years old. He's going to be 41 years old at the end of next season. And the last full season that we got out of Rodgers was the least efficient season of his career since his rookie campaign, and he's coming off of a major knee injury, so I just have a few red flags with him. And that being said, I think if the Jets get that 2022 version of Rodgers, I think that they're still going to be very good. Again, this is a team that over the past few seasons under the helm of Robert Saleh, they've had probably the worst QB play out of any team in the National Football League. If Rodgers can just play good Rodgers football, we don't need MVP level Rodgers football, and again, I'm not expecting that. The Jets are going to be a very good football team, although we are getting news today that Hassan Reddick, new signing, reportedly wants out of the Jets. So there's a little bit of drama going on in New York already. What's new in the Big Apple with the Jets? But this was a tough cut for me, man. I like Rodgers a lot. I think he could get on this list. I still think he's going to be very good next year. But there's a lot of good quarterbacks in the league nowadays, Carson. And just, again, with his age and injury concerns, I had to leave him off this one.
Age is of little import when you have seen the machine elves and experienced the great wonders of the ayahuasca. Not to mention when you haven't made your body brittle and weak by injecting it with the vaccine. I expect Aaron Rodgers to have the best season of his career and to look younger and more athletic than ever. So I do have him on my list, actually. My toughest cut, who I'm going to presume is on your list, Logan. There's really two guys who stand out to me because of the level that they have both reached in specific periods and because of the natural ability that they both have. That's Trevor Lawrence and Jalen Hurts. T-Law is a tough cut for me because I'm a deep believer in his talent. I think that he has all the tools that you can look for. 6'6", great mover, hell of an arm talent. And I do think that he's generally a pretty good processor and a solid decision maker. I just think everybody who I have above him was significantly more productive last year. And although I don't think that all of the turnovers were on T-Law, I do still think he can do a bit better taking care of the football. And the guys above him have just outproduced. And I also have some really impressive young talents who I do think are already doing a better job of taking care of the football and maybe don't have the full just array of athletic tools that he does, but they're still pretty darn good athletes and creators. And Hurts is tough because a couple years ago, 2022, he was playing at an MVP level, and he does have this incredible blend of the rushing ability with still being a solid thrower of the football. I just thought that we saw him really regress as a passer this past year. I thought that we saw him less comfortable going through his reads. I thought that we saw him feel the loss of Shane Steichen from that offense. And so he just wasn't the same player this past year. And again, the guys who I have in my 9 and 10 spot, spoiler, but those are young quarterbacks. And I believe that all four of these guys are very talented. They're all on upward trajectories broadly, even though Hurts and Lawrence took a step back this past year. I still think that they are broadly ascending quarterbacks. But I think I just believe in the guys at 9 and 10 a little bit more right now.
Yeah, I understand that. Trevor Lawrence is on my list. I don't have Jalen Hurts. He was also a tough cut for me. The next guy, honorable mention, I'll give a shout out to Kyler Murray. I think Murray's going to have a good bounce back year. And Jared Goff was a tough cut for me too. I think Jared Goff throws a really great football. I think he is great out of play action. He's got a little bit of that bozo gene though, man. He's got a little bit of that Jared Goof trait, and I can't wash that away, man. There's always a Jared Goof moment lingering. It intrigues me that you have two young quarterbacks in these spots, and I anticipate you having this gentleman much higher on your list, considering the level he was at last season. That's Dak Prescott. He played at an MVP level last year, 4,500 passing yards, 36 TDs to 9 picks. He had a passer rating of just under 106 and a completion percentage of just under 70%. He was first in touchdowns, he was second in QBR, and he was third in passer rating, passing yards, and completion percentage maybe this is on my hater stuff. I know what Dak Prescott is. I know what Dak Prescott is going to give me in the playoffs. Like Jared Goff, I think Dak has a little bit of that bozo gene, but I would just feel wrong leaving a guy like Dak off of this list after a career year. I think he's going to have a good year. He's still got talent around him. He's got an A-plus weapon in CD Lamb. He's got a really good ascending offensive line in front of him. I think the Cowboys have done a really good job of replenishing that line. When he came into the league, it was the best line in football unequivocally, right? And over the past couple of years, they've had to retool there, and I think they have. So I think Dak's going to have a really good year, but I think that's probably the absolute apex. I think that was a career year for Dak, probably the best that we're ever going to get out of him. And like I said, man, Dak's shown me some bad in big moments, and I can't wash that away. I can't wash that taste out of my mouth, man. I feel like I know who Dak Prescott is, and there are other guys on this list above him that I trust more and that are ascending more, and so that's why Dak lands in my 10 spot.
You told me before we started recording that you thought I was going to be pissed with who you had at number 10, and using my telepathic powers, I deduced that it was probably going to be Dak. I do have him a few spots higher than this, and I do think that he's not in like a clear tier, but he is clearly above the guys who I would have at 9 and 10. And I can hear a case for dudes who just have more ability as creators than Dak being above him, but I don't want to understate how consistently polished and excellent he was as a pocket passer this past year. I mean, he was just absolutely surgical. The footwork, the ability to quickly make good decisions, to hang in the pocket without really taking negative plays, while still being willing to push the ball downfield, make some big throws, limiting mistakes. I mean, you mentioned over 4,500 yards, 36 touchdowns to 9 picks. Absolutely elite production, and he still is an above average athlete. Certainly not a great one, not one of the best play extenders, not one of the best raw arm talents, but a good arm talent and a solid mover. So I just think he's a very complete quarterback at this stage, and I get it. It was not good in the playoffs this past year. I also think, though, people who look at him and say he is the reason that the Cowboys fell short in the playoffs this year are missing the big picture. Dak was not good when it matters, and the fact that he ended up with 400 yards in that game doesn't matter because he attempted 60 passes, most of them against soft coverages, because that game was over in the first half against the Packers. But even though he was out of sync with the receivers early and he threw a pick six, which was killer, like, you weren't going to win with him playing at that level. At the same time, the reason it was so ugly is because your defense allowed 8 yards per play and 41 points, and they were getting gashed on the ground, and then they couldn't stop the play action off of that, and they were just blowing coverages on the back end. Like, that was more of a hideous performance from the Cowboys defense, no question, than it was from Dak, even though Dak was not good. So even though he may have the elite regular season production this past year that would put him up against the true tier 1 guys, I don't see him there because he doesn't have that same creation ability and because he hasn't elevated in the playoffs. At the same time, I think we have a tendency to overly blame the quarterback for wins and losses, particularly on the big stage, and sometimes to overreact to small sample size in the playoffs. Like, you learn more from regular season football when you have a 17-game sample than you do from one playoff game. That's not to say that the playoffs don't test you more and that they don't matter. They absolutely do. It's just, I would like to see Dak have a couple more chances at it. And he's had a few chances, and he's never been great in the playoffs, but I don't think he's been a disaster there either. And I think the fact that he is the quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys makes him the target of more ire than is probably deserved. So when I look at the numbers 9 and 10, it's like, yes, they have more upside. They are better athletes, but they don't match the consistent pocket brilliance of Dak yet. Not missing throws, just consistently churning out elite offense, marching down the field with these really composed, consistent drives. That's what I do think he brings you, and that's why I think he belongs a few spots higher than this, in my opinion. In my 10 spot, though, Logan, I ironically have the guy who absolutely dusted him in the playoffs. I have Jordan Love in my 10 spot, and he is the biggest mover from where I would have had these dudes preseason going into last year, because I wasn't sold on Jordan Love. And even through the first half of last year, I was not high on him early enough. I thought, yes, the arm talent is very impressive, but I was like, it isn't tier 1 arm talent. And then he was still struggling some with his ability to process the game. He was making some bad mistakes. And then down the stretch of the season, it just all clicked. Last 10 games, he leads the Packers to go 7-3, leads them to average over 27 points per game, puts forth over 2,600 yards through the air, 23 touchdowns to 3 picks, passer rating of 112, almost 8 yards per attempt. And he did that with just a solid young receiving core, right? I like the depth of the group, but without a true number one. And that raw arm talent is pretty remarkable, man. I mean, his ability to make throws off platform, on movement, off his back foot, variety of arm angles. It's just incredibly impressive. And he is a good play extender. He is a rushing threat. Not one of the sport's best, but he gives you over 250 yards and a few touchdowns on the ground this past year. And when I thought about him versus T-Law, one thing that I did consider is just the offensive minds that they're working with, because I do think Jordan Love is a beneficiary of having Matt LaFleur, where even though we see a few times a game where he just lets that raw arm talent unload and he makes a special play, you also do have a consistent run game. You have a phenomenally effective play action game, and he's very good at executing there. He's an extremely effective short passer, but I do think the creative and effective play calling that he's getting is just lapping what T-Law has had in Jacksonville. But I just think that stretch that he put together over the last 10 games was really, really outstanding. And the decision-making did improve. The one exception to that was the Niners game, and particularly just the last play of the season, man. And that does leave a sour taste in your mouth. There was so much good from him down the home stretch, but trying to throw across your body off your back foot into triple coverage on first down when all you need is 3 to tie that game up, like, that was a real first-year starter moment. And again, you talk about Dak having the bozo gene. I don't think Dak's doing that in that spot. He makes mistakes, but I think he has the awareness to not force the issue on one play like that. So Jordan Love will learn. He'll get better in that respect. And with his tools, with the level that he played at for more than half a year of high-stakes football when his team needed it most, I think he's earned this spot. I think he's earned this spot over T-Law, even if T-Law has a bit more natural ability. And he should only get better from here.
I have Jordan Love a few spots higher, and
Ooh,
I have him above Trevor Lawrence as well. That signal I did right there, something my old baseball coach used to do when we made an error on the field. That's a brain fart. You let it go, man. Those plays are going to happen.
That's triangle. Dak should have hit triangle instead of square.
I agree with you. I don't think a poised quarterback like that is making that kind of mistake. A veteran is going to know that situation. But again, I'm not also going to magnify one single play out and hold that completely against him. Like you said, it's one game, and I was also skeptical about Jordan Love, man. You highlight the final 10 games, and the final 8 games, 270 yards per game, 18 TDs, 1 pick, passer rating of 112.7 with a completion percentage of 70%.
That's of the regular season, I think, right?
Correct,
I just took that and added the 2 playoff games.
Got you. And I'm glad of what you highlighted, too. I do think he's a little bit of a beneficiary of a great offensive mind. I also want to give the Packers credit for not rushing this along, man. And I know this is an overblown storyline because it's historic, but I mean, come on, guys.
Yeah.
They've done it 3 times now. And I want to give them an immense amount of credit for not rushing him along in this process, for letting him learn behind a Hall of Famer and getting him acclimated to the NFL, man. You can ruin an NFL quarterback very quickly by putting him out there much too soon. And it may have not manifested itself in the first 10 games or however with Jordan Love. Guess what? It didn't manifest itself completely in Aaron Rodgers' first 10 games, right? It took time. And in the second half of the season, when Jordan Love had real NFL games and experience under his belt, he looked like one of the best quarterbacks in all of football. And you highlighted another big key to me. He's doing this with receiving talent that is, I mean, not great elite compared to other teams. Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks, Christian Watson, Tucker Kraft, Luke Musgrave. I mean, these are not household names. I don't want to take anything away from those guys. I think they're talented. But this is not like he's got a go-to guy, that other guys do. Jordan Love is on time. He is uber accurate. I love the way, especially in the red zone, Jordan Love can fit balls in boxes, man. That guy is super accurate. He's poised. He's comfortable in the pocket. And I love the flashes of play extension that you mentioned. The guy's got legit wheels. When he needs to make a play happen, he can scramble. I think the Packers have done it again. I think they have found their franchise quarterback. And, yeah, I think Jordan Love is going to continue to get better, man. I think he showed you a glimpse of what he's going to give us consistently down the back half of this season. And I think the Packers are only going to get better, man. This is a very young team, a very young offense with a very young quarterback. And, I think Jordan Love is just going to get better this next season. So, It's interesting to me that you go with some younger guys. I have some older guys in my 10 and 9 spot. In my 9 spot, I have Matthew Stafford.
Oh, the disrespect. I'm sick. I'm going to be sick.
I would hear out an argument for Stafford as a top 5 quarterback. I really would. In the week 11 to week 15 stretch last season, Stafford played like maybe the best quarterback in football. 280 passing yards per game, 14 TDs to 1 pick, a passer rating of 114.2 with a completion percentage of 66%. Again, that's week 11 to week 15. Overall, he's 24 TDs, 11 picks, just under 4,000 passing yards, and he's doing this with a young roster, one that was not supposed to be competitive at all. This is a rebuilding offensive line, a young receiving core, and Stafford did it. If we were just going off talent, like I said, man, I think Stafford has a top 3 arm in football. I think it's Mahomes, I think it's Allen, and then I think it's Stafford. He's got one of the most live arms in the NFL. He throws lasers. The guy's got a rocket launcher attached to his shoulder. He can make any throw in the book, and he's still tough as nails. It's just where I think these guys are going. I think it's really hard for me to imagine Stafford being way, way better than last season. I think there's other guys that have more play extension. They're a little more mobile, and they're ascending. I think Stafford's going to be top 10 next season. I think he's going to be right around here. I think he's going to perform at this level. It's just the scaling of these other guys. Now, I think the Rams could very well win the NFC West next year. I think the Rams could win the damn NFC next year. I think that's how good Stafford is still as an arm talent, as a quarterback. But like I said, I think there's other guys that are just on different trajectories next season that are going to take off. And Stafford's just not there. But like I said, with his raw ability and talent at this age of his career, I think you could make an argument for him as a top 5 quarterback still in the NFL today.
Yeah, I have him closer to that than I do number 10. I just think that he is still an awe-inspiring talent and played as well as he ever has this past year. 2021, we all know what he did. He has 41 touchdowns in the regular season, and then he has one of probably the 10 best runs from a quarterback that we've seen to a Super Bowl in the playoffs. I thought he was every bit that good this past year. Maybe the raw touchdown totals don't reflect that, and he didn't have the same opportunity to prove that in the playoffs, although I did think he was really good in that game against the Lions.
He also finally had a running game this year, Kyron Williams balled out.
Finally had a running game, also had his best receiving duo that he has. Kupp obviously wasn't healthy all year, but things are coming together around him, and I think he is still playing at that elite level. Since he joined the Rams, they average just 18 points per game without him, over 24 points per game with him. To me, that is a telling stat about the kind of elite difference maker that he is. And it's not in the same way that you might see from even a Jordan Love, right? Who is not all about his play extension and athleticism in terms of speed and mobility, but Jordan Love has a leg up on Stafford there. Stafford is just such a ridiculous arm talent that he makes throws that nobody except for Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and maybe Justin Herbert can, but Herbert doesn't attempt them like Stafford does. Like, Stafford is so aggressive and so remarkable at throwing dudes open, at creating advantages where they just don't exist for inferior arm talents. That's where I do prefer him just slightly to Dak. I think that those two are again, in a sort of mini tier above the young ascending quarterbacks, just because it's so proven. It's so reliable with them. And as much as I believe in the talent of a Jordan Love, in a CJ Stroud, who I'm sure we're going to be talking about here shortly, we're still talking about a relatively small sample size with those dudes. And like, I loved what Geno Smith did in the 2022 season. I thought he was playing at a top 10 level, but then he regressed just a bit this past year. I still think that he's underrated. I think his talent is really impressive, but sometimes when guys emerge like that, you can have a little bit of an outlier season with a sample size like you get in one season of NFL football. And that's where I think Stafford and Dak have the advantage. Both of them, we're talking about 2 elite seasons in 3 years. But Stafford's game has translated better to the big moments because he's just more talented. And it's not just arm talent. I mean, his deception is phenomenal, right? Like, this is the only dude in football who regularly throws no-look passes. Patrick Mahomes does not throw as many no-look passes as this man. He's an excellent play-action quarterback. Again, the disguise is great there. So I just have the utmost confidence in Stafford. If he could limit the mistakes just a bit more He'd be even higher if he were just a bit more mobile. His mobility is not bad for his age.
He still manipulates the pocket really well.
He does.
Sure.
He moves well in that pocket. He absolutely does. I think that's always been underrated with Stafford. But the top 5, I think, are sort of a group of their own at this stage. I have him right outside that group. So in my number 9 spot, I do have, to me, probably the shining star of the true next generation. Not when we're talking about the Burrows and the Allens and the Mahomes. I guess Justin Herbert is kind of the next generation. Whatever. The youngest guy on this list. How about that? That is CJ Stroud, who I just think had the best season that we've seen from a rookie quarterback. Herbert is great competition there, absolutely. 9 games of Dan Marino. You can talk about Andrew Luck, RG3, Russ. There's a lot of candidates, but I don't think that we've ever seen somebody blend creation, just the talent, with limiting mistakes, with completely turning a football team season around and delivering over and over again in huge moments. That's what CJ Stroud did. He led the league in passing yards per game while also having the lowest interception rate in football, while ranking 3rd in passing yards per attempt. And he had a very good receiving core this past year. He's about to have an insane one. But the 2 dudes who were top of the league in terms of passing yards per attempt were Brock Purdy and Tua, who I believe have pretty clearly the single greatest just surplus of offensive talent around them, and also the 2 best offensive minds in football. So, those are guys who are just set up to succeed in a totally different way. CJ Stroud didn't have that. The line wasn't great. The receivers weren't proven as elite talents coming into the year, and yet he produced at this ridiculous level. As a rookie, he will hang in the pocket and he will make big-time throws. You think about that Bucs game. I mean, how many times did he hang in there and just before taking a hit, deliver a big throw downfield? And they needed every single one of them. And he really hits on those explosive plays. And credit to Tank Dell for that. Credit to Nico Collins. Those are explosive playmakers. But he was 3rd in 20-plus yard completions. And on top of that explosiveness, I really do trust him to maintain his composure. And like Jordan Love, they're similar athletes. I think maybe Love is a little bit more mobile, a little bit more dynamic in that sense athletically, but he can make some plays with his legs as well. So he really had maybe his roughest performance of the year in that second playoff game against Baltimore. It was that and the Jets game. Those were the 2 games where he looked like a rookie, and that offense really got shut down. But I thought Baltimore was a phenomenal defense all year. I thought they played a phenomenal game. I thought they shut down the run game, and they just took away those shot plays. So that, to me, was a reflection of, yes, CJ is not yet among the elite of the elite, the top 5 sort of guys, but it was more about that defense. So the dudes who are above him, to me, either just have crazier physical tools or they're just more experienced. They have more mastery of the game intellectually. I do still think Dak is a better pure pocket passer than CJ Stroud. I just think a lot of it is expectation. Dak's been at this level, and people are waiting for him to take the leap, to deliver in the big moment, and he hasn't met expectations in that way for a lot of people. CJ, it's like you get to the playoffs, and you have a really rough second game in the playoffs. That's okay, because you got there as a rookie. You already exceeded all expectations. We view that very favorably. We view Dak very unfavorably. I still do think in a vacuum, Dak is the better quarterback at this point.
That's fair, and I applaud you for being logically consistent with most of these lists, going and I'm referencing this even back to our NBA lists, valuing the resume instead of projection. With most of my list, as I have mentioned before, I am doing a little bit of projection with these lists, what I expect to happen. So I do have Stroud a few spots higher. He's coming off of the greatest rookie QB campaign in NFL history. And like you said, I would hear arguments for other guys, Luck, RG3, Justin Herbert, Baker Mayfield. I would hear arguments for those guys, but like you mentioned, led the NFL in passing yards per game. Number 3 in total passing yards by a rookie. Number 6 in total passing TDs by a rookie. Tied 2nd in fewest interceptions by a rookie quarterback. And number 3 in passer rating by a rookie QB. But as you mentioned, the most impressive thing is he took the Texans, who were in absolute despair, 3-13 the season previous. I was playing quarterback for them. Long neck Davis Mills. You go from that.
And you did your best.
I tried, man. I tried. I put the team on my neck, man. Went from worst to first in the AFC South. I mean, that is so hard to do as a rookie quarterback. And then he won a playoff game. He does this with unproven wide receivers who are very talented. Tank Dell and Nico Collins are shifty, man. They are agile as hell. But he also does this with the number 29 rushing attack in football by yards per attempt. I mean, I think that's a testament to Stroud, to a lot of other guys on this list have other areas where they can depend on. Stroud put the entire offense on his back as a rookie, and I think he's going to get even better, man. The guy has got huge balls, the way he stays in the pocket, makes big-time throws.
Yeah, big nuts.
And he's great at protecting the football. So there is a little bit of projection in my rankings, and that is why I have him a few spots higher.
That's fair. He's also adding one Stephon Diggs to his receiving core.
Very true.
So I do think that we could see a bit of an explosion in terms of picking up a few more touchdowns this year for sure than he did this past year, and maybe leading a more elite offense overall, because the Texans were a solid team offense, but you mentioned line wasn't great, run game wasn't great, and now you're just adding an even more overwhelmingly talented receiving core.
And I'm glad you hit on another thing. The last area where I really think Stroud can improve, he's great at hitting the big shot plays. He throws one of the best deep balls in football. This is an issue with the next quarterback on my list too. I think he needs to do a better job taking the easy stuff, going underneath. You don't need to bake the whole cake, get the ingredients, and eat it all at once. Take it one step at a time. If Stroud can get better at that, you're looking at a very, very complete quarterback.
Yeah, man. He's pretty damn complete for a rookie already, that's for sure. Okay, who's in your number 8 spot?
Last Hot Take show, I said that Josh Allen was the most underrated quarterback in football, and I think Allen is number 2. To this guy. Number 8, I have Trevor Lawrence. And I think very quickly after a down year, you talk about expectations for a rookie quarterback, expectations for a Dak Prescott. I think expectations have a lot to do with the prism that we view Trevor Lawrence's last season and his career thus far in. And I don't want to dress this up. This was a very disappointing season for Trevor Lawrence in terms of his expectations. Coming off of his second year, you have a comeback win over the Chargers in the playoffs. He's 25 TDs to 8 interceptions. Last season, even when we did this exact list, I said I was expecting him to ascend to an MVP level. That did not happen. Went 8-8, had just over 4,000 passing yards, 21 TDs to 14 picks, a passer rating of 88.5, and a completion percentage of 65.6%. And he ended the season in really rough form. The Jags go 1-5 down the stretch, infamously in their last week. This is a win-to-get-in format to win the AFC South, to go to the playoffs. They have an 8-point loss to the Titans. And in that stretch specifically, he has 254 yards per game, 9 TDs to 7 picks, with a passer rating under 82 and a completion percentage of 62%. But I think we have to contextualize what happened during that 6-game stretch. He dealt with a high ankle sprain, a concussion, and a shoulder sprain during all of these games. Christian Kirk, his best receiver, misses the final 5 games of the season. And throughout the year, Trevor Lawrence is playing behind one of the worst offensive lines in all of football. So everybody can sell their stock. Everybody can say that they don't think Trevor Lawrence is going to be the franchise quarterback that he was touted out to be. That's the kind of popular take at this point with Trevor Lawrence. Oh, he's a bust. He's not what we expected him to be. I still believe in Trevor Lawrence. I think he deserves every dollar of that contract. I would have paid him whatever he wanted. I think this is a bona fide franchise quarterback. And I think you also have to mention that his first year was a complete wash, too. I view this as effectively his 3rd year as a quarterback. Year 1 was a disaster under Urban Meyer.
Bro is running so many circles around himself to defend T-Law that he's warping time.
I'll do it, man.
I like T-Law a lot.
I'll do it. We are entering year 3 of the Peterson Press Lawrence combo. I did it last year. I'll do it again. I think this is the year that Trevor Lawrence breaks through, man. I think he changes a lot of people's minds this year, and I think he cracks a lot of people's lists. And a big component of that is what I think his best trait is, and that is play extension, that is throwing on the run. I think Press Taylor and this offense do such a phenomenal job of setting Trevor up for success, getting him on the move, out of the pocket, running RPOs, running play action stuff, getting him on the move. That's where I think Trevor Lawrence has a leg up on most of the quarterbacks in the NFL. He can throw on the run accurately so well, and they do such a good job of weaponizing that, especially when you have such a lackluster offensive line in front of him. Now, I mentioned an area that Stroud needs to improve on. I think there are 2 big areas where Trevor Lawrence needs to improve. One is scanning and utilizing the entirety of the field. There's a lot of plays on footage where I think Lawrence just misses guys where he's not looking at them. He initially reads this side of the field, and then he just locks in on one side of the field. And that will just lock him into making tighter window throws where he forces a ball, or scrambling where there's an open guy on the other side of the field that he's completely disregarded. So I think Lawrence can do a much better job of that. Also, interrelated with that is the fact that sometimes he has to do that because the pressure gets home so quickly on him that he has to go and make something happen immediately. I looked at this stat earlier before the show. Lawrence has the quickest pressure to snap time out of any quarterback that isn't named Tua Tagovailoa. Tua has that stat because he gets rid of the ball quicker than any quarterback in the league because of his arm limitations. Trevor Lawrence has that issue because he plays behind one of the worst O-lines in football and the pressure gets home so quickly. The other things that I think he can improve on, taking the easy stuff underneath. I love Trevor Lawrence. I love that gunslinger Trey Carson. You know I do. You got to get better at just taking what the defense gives you, taking the little stuff, nickel and diming defenses. I think it's going to come with time. And again, interrelated with that, being a little less reckless. Sometimes you got to eat plays, man. Again, you can't make the whole comeback in one play. So those are areas that I think he can improve on, but I think a lot of people just overblew that stretch at the end of the season where he struggled. I think injuries had a big deal to do with that. I think Christian Kirk being out had a lot to do with that. And I think this is the year that we finally see Trevor Lawrence break through. Maybe not to an MVP level, but to a consistent top 10 level.
So I don't think that we're very far apart on T-Law, and I think that we've both, over the course of time, been pretty firmly on the side of this dude is an elite talent. He's going to be an elite quarterback. Just wait, the numbers maybe don't reflect it yet, but he's already, I would say, better than the numbers had suggested. For sure, he's been playing in a rough situation with a bad line, with bad play calling, with bad coaching, with not great receiver play. I mean, consistently, his receivers have been towards the top of the league in drops, and you can say, well, part of that is T-Law throws a very hot ball. He throws like as hard a ball as anybody, and that's fair, but I also think a lot of those plays are on the receivers. So I'm a little bummed to not have him in my top 10 just because I want to be stamped on the pro T-Law side. And I remember when we did our rankings last year, and we did those towards the end of the regular season, so I don't think that we had Burrow or Herbert in there, and T-Law was firmly in my top 10, and that was right before Christmas dinner, and I remember that's the name that my cousins asked me about the most. They were like, why do you have T-Law so high? What has he done? And I'm defending him. I'm defending him in the situation. I completely buy into the raw talent, and at that time, I remember I was very close between him and Stroud. I had them one spot apart, and I said, I'm going to lean T-Law just because the body of work is a little bit larger. However, I think I've been moved by just a few more weeks of football. I really, really deeply believe in CJ Stroud, and I did not see the progress I wanted to from T-Law this past year. Love is a tougher one, but I don't know, man. I just feel like he had it more together this year. He felt to me like he was already more playing at the level of an elite quarterback, whereas T-Law just had the elite tools and still is working on putting it all together.
A little more poised. Yeah, that's
a little more poised. Especially in the second half of the year. And I worry about sample size with Jordan Love a bit because it's like first half of the year, he wasn't that poised guy. He had a major mid-year improvement. But I just think we are already seeing a more polished quarterback with him. And I wanted to have T-Law on my list at number 10, but then I remembered the existence of the guy who I have in my 8 spot, Logan, who was the first guy off your list. That's Aaron Rodgers. I think that this is really just a body of work, a reputation bet at this point. And sample size does matter here. Like, who would I want going into a playoff game? Aaron Rodgers versus CJ Stroud or Jordan Love. As much as I love those young guys, I just have the utmost faith in Aaron Rodgers to execute. And of course, he's not the athlete. He's not the creator that he used to be. And in the 2022 season, in a lot of ways, he was just a slightly above average quarterback in terms of his individual production, in terms of the team offense that he generated. But I think we're going to see a bounce back year from him because 2020 and 2021, both, he was MVP level. And I get that he's only older now than he was in 2022, and he's coming off of a major injury. But I trust that mind. I trust that arm. Even though it's not quite what it used to be, it's still a hell of an arm. And in the 2020 and 2021 seasons, when he was at an MVP level, it wasn't about athleticism. It wasn't about creating out of structure. It wasn't 2011 or 2015 Aaron Rodgers. It was just him surgically marching down the field and being so great situationally. And I do think having a legit number one like Garrett Wilson, having the situation that he's chosen in New York, I expect him to have a bounce back year. So there's just a little bit more built-in faith for him with me compared to Stroud and Love. The other guys above him, I think, do at this point just have more physical tools. But even 40-year-old Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers to me, man. And until I see him legitimately fall off, I believe in that guy.
Yeah, this is a good take, and I want to be clear too. There's not that large of a gap, honestly, between 12 and 8 to me. I think 12 and 8 are really, really close. And Rodgers is a tough cut, man. I've been a Rodgers defender forever. Like, even when people, have gotten on him for him being loony with his takes, I still think he's going to be a good quarterback. Now,
yeah.
The one area with Rodgers, I do wonder, just in terms of leadership, I wonder how much he's going to embrace that role, you know what I mean, as like the leader of this team. And if he can command the locker room in the same way. I wonder if there's just going to be a little drama there in New York. That's one red flag I have with Rodgers.
They were loving him. They were loving him last year. And then he tore everything, but...
I mean, I'd love him too if I had Zach Wilson as my guy.
Yeah. I do think it's a very different dynamic than Green Bay. Green Bay had basically just ignored drafting on the offensive side of the ball, and there was just the built-up tension of year after year just falling short. And sometimes, even if you're not necessarily going to a better situation in a vacuum, just moving on from a situation where things have sort of run their course can be a positive. Like, you can't just keep running things back over and over again. Even if you're good, there comes a point where there's just fatigue there, and you just can't take it emotionally. And, you can start to grate on each other a bit in a situation. I think that's what happened with Rodgers in Green Bay. And so on the leadership front, I would be more confident in him in New York, even though I do think he holds some very wacky beliefs. I don't think, based on what we've seen, heard, that really gets in the way of him having the respect, having good relationships with his teammates. Yeah. Remember, he was having lunch with a different teammate every practice, every day training camp.
That is the other side of this coin. Is I can understand guys just embracing him because of the hellscape that the Jets quarterback position has been for the past few seasons. The
only problem is how busy he's going to be with his vice president candidacy alongside RFK.
Gosh.
That's the real question.
Oh my gosh, bro. Yeah.
Just saying, has to be considered.
Yo, Nerd Sesh 2035 though, man.
We're 2035, my brother.
2036.
There we go. We will be freshly eligible. We will turn 35 on the campaign trail.
That's why I said 2030, because we'll be 35 years old. Yeah, we will be freshly eligible.
We're gonna be double trouble like they've never seen. Come on now.
Number 7, I have Jordan Love, and so we've already discussed them. At number 7, that's where I have him. I assume we will see one of these old wily veterans here, but I don't know. Is Carson going to throw a curveball?
Don't assume anything. That's another thing with the T-Law debate. Like, we have the same hierarchy of the young guys. I just think you're more bullish on the young guys compared to the old guys. I do still think that Stafford, Dak, Rodgers is a little bit tougher because we haven't seen him in a year, and the 2022 wasn't his best season. But again, there's that built-in faith. I think they've proven themselves to be better quarterbacks at this moment. If you're doing projecting, sure, but I'm not doing as much of that. I'm betting on what we've seen and who I feel that I can trust in those big moments. So I have Dak at number 7, and trust in big moments maybe wouldn't exactly be the slogan for Dak, but again, I do think that he's overall over-criticized, a bit underrated, and the body of work, man, I mean, last 3 years, he's given you 264 passing yards a game, 96 touchdowns, 34 picks, a lot of those coming in the 2022 season where he was more turnover prone. But I felt like we saw the best version of him this past year, and he's let out elite offense over and over again. Cowboys are averaging 29.5 points per game since 2021, and that's without a particularly strong running game. The running game has been solid, but not the elite backbone of this offense that it used to be. So I don't want to underrate that. I don't want to underrate his pocket passing. I feel like 7's a good spot. And he's very close to my number 6, who is Matthew Stafford, who we've also talked about. I just do prefer the raw talent with Stafford just a tad to Dak.
Yeah, and in my 6th spot, I have C.J. Stroud. So does that...
Really the old guard versus the new, man. You and I.
It really is.
Me, the old, wily veteran, grizzled for my years as an intrepid reporter. And you, the young Gen Z Fortnite merchant. That's the difference. I think we know who America wants to vote for.
The podcasters.
No,
The
me.
screenagers. The
Me.
screenagers.
The grizzled old drunk. 75 years I've been watching football. Sid Luckman is my goat.
Yeah, my goat's Otto Graham.
Yeah, what do you know about split ends, buddy?
What does that even mean, bro? Like in your hair? What do you know about Mr. Ed, the talking horse, bro?
Yeah, by the way, you revealed everything that needed to be said when you showed your lack of split end knowledge, Logan. How about flankers?
Oh, flank. Yeah, I know what a flanker is, bro.
Yeah, this is what they used to call receivers.
Yeah, flankers.
And split ends.
I didn't know that. I learned that today. Thank you, bro.
My knowledge is limitless.
He's a 75-year-old drunk. The knowledge is going to be... You get a beer in him, man. The knowledge is going to come out.
Buddy, I drink straight Johnny Walker 24 hours a day. That and my pipe, that's all I need. Throw another shrimp on the barbie. Get in on all the UFC 305 action live from the land down under at DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of UFC. The middleweight title's on the line for the main event, but the card is stacked full of rip snorter blokes and Sheilas.
And speaking of stacked, if you're new to DraftKings, listen up. New customers bet $5 to get $150 instantly in bonus bets. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code NERDS. That's code NERDS for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you just bet $5. UFC 305, it's going to be a ripper of a good time. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours.
All right, anyways, let's get into the top five. If you have anybody outside of these five dudes in your top five, and I'm not speaking to you because I know that you don't, but to the broad public, I'd be fascinated in that take because I don't think they have an argument. But who's in your five spot, Logan?
5 and 4, I'd hear an argument interchangeably for. I really would. But at number 5, I have Justin Herbert. Herbert this last season, 5 and 8, 3,134 passing yards, 20 TDs to 7 picks, a passer rating of 93.2, and a completion percentage of 65.1%. The thing that makes Herbert really hard to gauge is just his situation. You know, I think he's covered up so many gaping holes in the Chargers organization since he entered the league now, from having the incompetent head coach of Brandon Staley. This is a Chargers team that has had the number 21 or worse scoring defense every season of his career. And 3 of the 4 seasons that they have had Herbert at the helm, they have had a number 27 or worse rushing attack. So, I mean, you're just asking Herbert to be Superman, basically, to shoulder the entire load of this team and to do everything for them. And he has had one of the greatest starts to a career of any quarterback we've ever seen. Number 1, most passing yards in a QB's first 4 seasons. Number 2, most passing touchdowns in a quarterback's first 4 seasons, only to Dan Marino. Marino's absurd. Herbert's at 114. So Marino's at $142, which is ridiculous.
Any 40-year-old's passing record is insane.
Yeah. And he's got the number 6 highest completion percentage in a QB's first 4 seasons. I think it is a testament to Justin Herbert's abilities that the train wreck Chargers have even been competitive. Again, as you're talking about with the QB attribution thing, with team success, and with the QB's individual performance, I don't know where the Chargers would be if they had average quarterback play. They'd probably be the worst team in the league over this stretch. Herbert's been 30 and 32 as a starter. Sure, that may be underwhelming compared to his talent relatively. How many games has his defense blown? How many games has Brandon Staley blown by himself? You know, how many games has Herbert played perfectly and the Chargers have just left him hanging?
Yeah.
A lot. It's a rhetorical question. But I've got Herbert here. But as I said, man, with his ability, with his talent, it's a really tough situation to gauge him in. I would hear an argument for him at number 4.
Well, you're about to hear it right now, buddy. I have Justin Herbert above Joe Burrow. This, to me, has been a pretty close debate for the last couple years, but I think that in some ways, both these guys getting hurt this year was illuminating because Justin Herbert got hurt and the Chargers went 0-5, averaging 14 points per game, whereas they've averaged 25 points per game over the course of his career. Cincinnati was averaging 20.2 points per game with Joe Burrow, and then they averaged 23.4 points per game without him, with Jake Browning in his place. Browning averaged more yards per attempt, had a higher completion percentage, averaged more yards per start. No, I do not think he is on Joe Burrow's level. Yeah, I do think that he sucks, but the fact that he was able to produce comparably and lead actually better team offense within the scope of that season, I think tells you something. It's not everything. I'm not here to put forth Joe Burrow slander, but
He's in a better situation. He's definitely in a better situation.
Absolutely. I mean, you read off the stats, dude. The last 2 years, like the Chargers have been 30th in rushing yards and rushing yards per attempt. Then they were 24th and 27th, respectively. He's never had a top 20 scoring defense. He's never had a good receiving core. Keenan Allen's been hurt. Mike Williams has been hurt. They whiffed on Quentin Johnson. His head coach sucked. And so people always love to say, oh, Herbert gets every excuse in the world. But what if what I just said isn't both true and important? And in spite of all that, he leads you to average 25 points per game consistently, one of the best offenses in football. He hits that 4,700 yard, 30 touchdown, 10 interception pace every year. And on the flip side, I do think that Joe Burrow is very, very protected in terms of discourse. I think he's the most protected quarterback in football, man. I think once he got that Super Bowl run, I think he was elevated into some conversations that maybe he hadn't quite earned yet. And if not for an Evan McPherson masterclass and a completely uncharacteristic Patrick Mahomes meltdown and a really strong showing from the Cincinnati defense, like all these things that are about the team, I don't know that Joe Burrow would be in those conversations. And even this past year when he was playing horribly, right? Horribly through the first 4 weeks of the season, everybody said he's hurt, he's not right. And then the next week, he plays fine and it's like, okay, we're just done with that. We're not going to re-examine that stretch. And I don't think that he was at 100%, but there's a double standard, man. I don't want to make this a Josh Allen thing, but I'm about to make this a Josh Allen thing. Down the home stretch of 2022, Josh Allen has a shoulder injury, and he is still playing great football, but not quite as well as he was in the first half of the year. Because he's injured, nobody talks about it. All he gets is criticism. So I just think, again, there is the most glaring double standard in the world when it comes specifically to Burrow versus Allen, which to me is not a debate, but to some other people, Logan, it is still very much a debate. I'm going to read off some numbers to you right now, okay? The best offense that Joe Burrow has ever led. Keep in mind, this is with an elite wide receiver duo and easily one of the 5 best receivers in football. Best scoring offense he's led, number 7 in football. The worst that Josh Allen has led since he ascended to that star level in 2020 when Burrow came into the league was the number 6 scoring offense. The other 3 years, they were top 3 every time. So let's continue to compare Allen's stats since Burrow came into the league to Burrow's stats. Turnovers per game, Joe Burrow, 0.9, Josh Allen, 1.1. There we have a slight win for Joe Burrow. Touchdowns per game, Burrow, 2.06, Josh, 2.62. Total yards per game, Burrow, 282, Allen, 303. Points per game in terms of the team offense, Burrow, 24.6, Allen, 28.6. That's with Joe Burrow having more talent objectively on his offense. Record, if you want to talk about record, which I don't think is a pure reflection of a quarterback's ability at all. But a lot of people will say, oh, look at the team success in the playoffs. So let's look at it overall. Joe Burrow, 29, 22, and 1. Josh Allen, 48 and 18. In the playoffs, what side of the ball is a quarterback responsible for? Logan, does a quarterback play defense?
No.
Quarterback doesn't play defense. Quarterback's job is to put up points. Josh Allen, the Bills offense, has averaged 27.8 points per game. The Bengals offense in the playoffs has averaged 23.3 points per game. In the playoffs, let's look at how these dudes have played individually. Josh Allen, 326 total yards per game. Joe Burrow, 275, 50-yard per game gap. Josh Allen, 26 touchdowns to just 5 turnovers. Joe Burrow, 9 touchdowns to 4 turnovers. Where's the debate here? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. It's all on the back of just a couple of playoff moments that aren't even about Joe Burrow. They're about Joe Burrow's team. So I love Joe Burrow. I think he is absolutely top 5, but I just don't think he's a creator and a raw talent like the dudes above him. Lamar Jackson, right? You take him off the field, the Ravens offense craters. The second you put him on the field, they are elite. Josh Allen, again, just single-handedly leads elite offense year after year after year, even with below-average line play, even with a below-average running game, even with a bad receiving core outside of Stephon Diggs these last couple of years. I don't think Joe Burrow has that sort of individual impact. And I think that Herbert is absolutely closer to the first group. I just think his raw ability is exceptionally valuable. And you see that because his team also fell apart with him off the field. I just think those dudes with their raw ability are a bit more valuable than Burrow.
Talk to him. And I want to be...
I just did.
I would hear Herbert and Burrow over Lamar. I could be convinced by a case, I think. I'm not going to do it, but I would hear an argument for either of these gentlemen at number 3. And I'm glad you said all that. The first
Because of
line,
the pure passing ability?
yes, it is
Yeah.
an archetypal difference. When it comes to the playoffs, I would hear an argument out that it's
I
just more
agree.
valuable having guys that can be on time, that can make all the throws, that can reach that level as a pocket passer. Lamar just, frankly, hasn't shown it. We'll get into that with Lamar. But the first line that I wrote under Burrow, I think he got a little overrated after the Bengals Super Bowl run. Ironically, I feel like Joe Burrow has now gotten a little underrated in his absence. The 2 full seasons prior to Burrow getting injured, 22-10, 9,086 passing yards, 69 TDs to 26 picks, a passer rating of 104.2, and a completion percentage of 69%. Number 1 in passer rating over those 2 seasons, number 2 in completion percentage, number 3 in TDs, number 4 in passing yards. Like you mentioned, I don't consider wins a QB stat, but he was number 4 in winning percentage by a quarterback over that time period. The A-plus traits, because you talk about Burrow maybe not being as talented in the raw as those guys, and I agree with that. I think he might have the best brain out of anybody. The guy is surgical. He is cerebral. He is a football genius. And we're talking about arms. I still think he has the second most accurate arm in football. Now,
Sure.
I also would hear an argument, too, about injury concerns. And maybe those limiting him from being higher. I'm worried. This guy tore his left ACL and MCL and partially torn his PCL as a rookie. Last season, tore a ligament in his right hand and wrist, and he has suffered various other minor knee, hand, and wrist injuries. I think he's lost a little bit of mobility. Again, man, it's just hard to come back from those injuries. And that Bengals line just continues to let him get beat up year in, year out. And this year's going to be the truest test of Burrow as a quarterback, Carson. You talked about this on friend of the show, the Joel Moran show the other day.
Mm-hmm.
The Bengals have taken a step back, man.
Yeah.
He's recovering from injuries. And I think this season he's going to have a Herbert-level kind of anvil on his shoulders. He's going to have to make up for the worst roster that has ever been around him.
Yeah.
I believe in Burrow's arm talent, his accuracy. I believe in his cerebralness, his surgical ability on the field. And, again, the thing that just becomes so invaluable when you get to the playoffs that I think is above other quarterbacks, the ability to change the play at the line of scrimmage and to make adjustments there. I still think Burrow does that at an A-plus tier. But I don't attribute that Super Bowl run solely to Burrow. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that, man, because I think a lot of people do that and they go, oh, well, if Josh Allen wants to be in these conversations, he should go to a Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
What are you guys talking about?
Yeah.
That to me is the worst argument that you could make when you're talking about these two quarterbacks. So
Agreed.
this is the year to me that I think we are going to be able to concretely separate Burrow, Herbert, and Lamar. If these guys are all healthy, I think this is going to be the year finally that we can make that distinction. As it stands right now, I got Herbert at 5, I got Burrow at 4, and I've got Lamar at 3.
Yeah, I think the 3 to 5 range is very close. And I do have a lot of respect for Joe Burrow. I do think that, as you mentioned, the accuracy is absolutely incredible. I will say, I do still think perception and some of these preconceived notions we have about these guys can skew things just a bit. For example, if you were going to have the Burrow-Allen debate, one thing that people would point to as like the biggest difference is Joe Burrow takes such perfect care of the football and Josh Allen is reckless.
He doesn't.
Joe Burrow turns the ball over. The 2 seasons that you mentioned, Joe Burrow threw 26 interceptions. Josh Allen threw 3 more. In the playoffs, Josh Allen has taken better care of the football on top of being a way more dynamic creator. I don't think there's a debate there. 3 through 5, I do. The reason that I lean Herbert is the raw arm talent. I do think that he's a better athlete in terms of his mobility at this stage as well, just by a bit. And Herbert does take care of the football, man. Really, my one gripe with him, the one way that he could take a level up here is be a bit more aggressive, especially at times in those late game scenarios. Like, he has that arm talent that is up there with Stafford, right? I mean, it's just below Mahomes and Allen. And he's just got to let it rip a little bit more, in my opinion. I think that that's how he can unlock a higher ceiling. But the ability overall to blend that crazy talent with this composure and this very controlled approach to the game is really impressive. I think that he is surgical, especially for his age. And I do give him a slight edge over Burrow at this point. We both have Lamar at 3, though, Logan. And you mentioned the concern with Lamar is the playoff performance, just if he's at the level as a thrower that you need to be, because we've seen time and again throughout NFL history, you need a quarterback who can legitimately make those composed, big-time throws, march you down the field on clutch drives through the air to win the Super Bowl. And Lamar fell short in that category this year. Why does that not hold him back from being in your top three?
Yeah, before we get into that, I want to give Lamar some props. And the big thing is the passing numbers are never going to blow you away. He's under 4,000 yards, doesn't surpass 25 passing TDs. But the guy had 800 yards on the ground and 5 rushing touchdowns. It's not the statistical argument. It's never the statistical argument with Lamar. It's the complete and utter control of the football game that you get with Lamar at the helm. The Ravens can just suffocate you with their style of play. Long, methodical, sustained drives that end in points. They get a lead on you, they hold on to the football, they protect it, and they just grind you into this vice, man, like a snake. And eventually they choke you out. That's how they win games. Lamar Jackson, still to this day, has the 5th highest winning percentage of any quarterback in NFL history. This last season, they had the number 9 third down offense and the number 7 red zone offense. He's so efficient. And I think we saw real growth from Lamar as a passer this last season. I thought he was more willing to stay in the pocket and make plays. I thought he was less dependent on his legs, and I thought he took more chances. He had the most passing yards of his career. He had the most yards per pass attempts and most passing yards per game of his career. But the elephant in the room is his playoff resume. He's 2-4 as a starter, just 221 total yards per game. That's passing and rushing combined. That is an abysmal number. And he's got 9 total TDs to 9 total turnovers. But I don't put this recent AFC title loss on him. I think people have overblown that. I think the Ravens team baffled that. I thought the defense played excellently. That is the best I've ever seen Patrick Mahomes and that Chiefs offense played. Big credit to that Chiefs defense for getting them to survive that football game. I mean, people want to act like that was a blowout. It was a 7-point game the entire way. The Ravens wholeheartedly had a chance to win that game. But I put that on Todd Monken. I don't put that on Lamar. I think they got way away from their identity. The Ravens handed the ball off 7 times. Fellas, you got the number 1 rushing attack in football. I just thought the Ravens offense was really, really predictable. It was, hey, Lamar, you're the MVP. Why don't you go out and do something? Mahomes can do that. Josh Allen can do that. Lamar's not that kind of guy. And when you let the offense be that predictable, you got to give him something else, man. He doesn't have premier offensive weapons that he can go to. I think they're better than years previous, but they're not A1. And so I just think they put this huge burden on him in that playoff game where they got away from their game plan, their style of play, their identity, and they put the entire burden on Lamar. And I just don't think Lamar's equipped to do that, man. He's not that kind of passer. And when you deliberately limit your offense and make yourself so predictable, I just think you can play him a little bit easier. So that's the big thing that Lamar's going to have to prove, man. It's still the big stain on him. And I know the Lamar detractors are always going to point to that. Until Lamar has a great playoff game, you're not really going to be able to point to anything else to make an argument against that. And I think that's what keeps him, despite him having 2 MVPs, despite him having the 5th highest winning percentage of any QB in NFL history, he's got to prove it. And until he does that, I don't think he can crack the upper echelon, the top 2 QBs in the league. That's the area that I think Lamar has to crack. For all these guys, Lamar, Burrow, and Herbert, I think it's them trying to climb into that top 2 range with Allen and Mahomes.
Yeah.
I just haven't seen it enough from Lamar.
No, I mean, Allen and Mahomes are the 2 dudes who have the balance of being elite rushing threats, Pat, when he wants to be, with being elite arm talents and just elite overall quarterbacks through the air. Lamar is not an elite passing quarterback. I did think he was a very good one throughout this regular season. I mean, he was very, very efficient, 4th in passing yards per attempt, while leading the league in rushing yards per attempt. And the raw individual numbers are never going to reflect the impact that Lamar Jackson has on an offense. It's like what you get from a Steph Curry, right? The extent to which these dudes just warp the geometry of a defense with how intently you have to be locked in on Steph at all times away from the ball, how aware you have to be of him pulling from 35 at any moment. Lamar has that same effect with his constant insane rushing ability, the threat that poses, what that opens up for the run game as a whole, what that opens up for the passing game. And that's why the Ravens are always an elite offense with Lamar. 28 points per game since he joined. Baltimore, and they average just 17 points per game in that time when he is not on the field. The problem is, I don't fully agree with you about this playoff game, and I do think that it was a bad play calling performance from the Ravens, absolutely. You're the best rushing attack in football, not to mention, that was an amazing Chiefs defense, but if there was one maybe vulnerable point, it was the run defense. So, for a number of reasons, that did not make sense because there wasn't some pressure to put up 30 points, right? It wasn't a shootout. It was, let's get 17 on the board, and running the football would have been a great way to do that. But Lamar missed a lot of throws in that game. He did. I thought that he was inaccurate, and he threw an inexcusable pick targeting Isaiah Likely in triple coverage to end their season. So, that was just a terrible moment. And that does make me question, should I put a Herbert above him? Should I put a Burrow above him? Just because I trust them so much more as pure passers. But I do think that Lamar's ability as a one-man offense is enough to make him my number 3 quarterback at this stage, because it's just absurd how he changes an offense single-handedly. And even down the stretch, without Mark Andrews, down the stretch of the regular season, they didn't skip a beat. They were still cooking. So he's just such a transformative offensive engine that I think the ceiling that you have with Lamar is too high to be outside my top 3, but it's very close because we need to see it translate more to the playoffs. And I've never been inclined to have a quarterback who isn't an elite passer up this high. I just think Lamar is one of one in the rushing threat that he poses, and he's the best passing quarterback that we've seen in this archetype. A Vic had more raw arm talent, although Lamar has a lot of raw arm talent, but I think Lamar is a better decision maker. I think he's a more efficient passer. I think that he's put it all together much more, and that makes him a one-of-one weapon.
It really does, and that's always going to be the knock until Lamar does it, right? The argument that you cannot win a Super Bowl with a rushing quarterback. You just haven't seen it. The best rushing quarterback to win a Super Bowl is Steve Young. And that's always going to be
the best passer in football.
Exactly. Dead-eye accurate.
Yeah. Led the league in passing touchdowns 3 straight years.
Would you take Lamar's arm over Cam?
I think he's put it all together more. I don't think that Cam was ever this accurate, and Lamar's accuracy isn't elite, but Cam was never this efficient. So yeah, I think that Lamar is a better passer than Cam.
I think I tend to agree. But Lamar, it sucks for him, man. He wears it for the whole archetype, for the rushing quarterbacks. But again, we've just never seen a weapon like this. And despite the playoff shortcomings, there's just a level that I trust, man. The regular season resume is crazy for Lamar. It is unreal.
It is.
I want to see him put it together. I'm rooting for Lamar. And I think the Chiefs are susceptible. I think there is a chance for the Ravens this season with the moves they have made. And they lost a lot. The Ravens famously this offseason lost 14 players. We'll talk way more in depth about them that when we get into season previews and stuff. They lost a lot, but they also gained a lot of talent. I think that this is a big prove-it year for Lamar, man, especially just every individual playoff game seems like it matters just a little bit more for Lamar.
Totally, and that's why this year was disappointing, because I thought, okay, this is the best version of Lamar that we've seen. I was higher on Lamar this season, absolutely, than ever before, because he put it all together, because he took strides as a passer, clearly. And then he didn't do it in the big game. And if you're the MVP, if we're going to talk about you as a top 3 quarterback, we have to hold you to that standard, because that was a letdown. You put 10 points on the board and you have several costly misses. That is on you. But you can't deny the offensive results that he's put forth with, as you mentioned, over the course of his career, easily one of the weakest receiving corps in football. And this year, finally, you had the best personnel with Zay, OBJ out there making some plays. But Mark Andrews gets hurt, so you don't even get to see the full-strength Ravens throughout the entirety of this year. So I'm optimistic that next year we see Lamar back in the playoffs. We get a better version of him. That's what I'm hoping for, and I am expecting that. But number 2, Logan, we both are going to agree. Why is it Patrick Mahomes? Why is Josh Allen clearly the best quarterback in football?
Oh, that's asinine. What's also was asinine was what people said that when I said that Josh Allen had an argument as the best playoff performing QB. Obviously, he's number 4. Brady's 1, Mahomes 2, Montana's 3. But to me, to say that he doesn't belong in that upper echelon is asinine. The point of the discourse was, can we finally give Josh credit for playing A-plus football and cut him some slack for the team losses? I tweeted all of these numbers. You can see them. I'm going to read them off here. Number 1 in playoff passing and rushing yards per game by a quarterback. Number 1 in playoff passing and rushing TDs per game by a quarterback. Number 1 in playoff rushing yards per game by a quarterback. These are all minimum 10 games played. Carson, he's got that mark, rushing yards per game by a quarterback, by over 20 yards. There's literally been, of a quarterback that got to the playoffs with regularity, Josh is the best rushing quarterback in playoff history. Number 2, hear me on this one, number 2 in least playoff turnovers per game by a quarterback, right?
Incredible.
All of these tired, overblown storylines that drag him down, the biggest one is that he's too reckless. Number 2 in least turnovers per game by a quarterback. Number 6 in playoff passer rating. Number 6 in playoff completion percentage. It's these tired storylines that drag him down. He's reckless. He's inaccurate. He's a loser. Whatever, man. Josh was number 1 last season in total touchdowns by a quarterback. 44. He had 15 rushing touchdowns, right? You can look at the passing numbers. He had 44 total TDs, 6 more than second place.
Incredible.
Josh is one of the most and best complete offensive engines in football history. He's number 2 in rushing touchdowns by a quarterback in NFL history, just second to Cam Newton. He is quickly coming for that record. And he's number 5 in NFL history in rushing yards per game by a quarterback. That's coupled with being one of the greatest arm talents in NFL history. I'm just not hearing, I refuse to hear any other argument for any other quarterback that's number 2 in the NFL today.
I'm with you, dude. 1,000%, Logan. Let's just read off some stats about Josh Allen since he reached his elite level in 2020. Most passing and rushing touchdowns in that time. Josh Allen has 173. Next is Pat, 151, gap of 22. Next is Justin Herbert, 125. Most passing and rushing yards since 2020. Pat has him there. Pat has 20,450. Then it's Josh with 20,000. Then you have a 2,000-yard drop-off to Justin Herbert. The number 1 scoring offense since 2020 is the Buffalo Bills at 28.6 points per game. Without even a decent starting running back until this past year with James Cook, with mediocre line play. And in 2020, they had a really good receiving core. But since then, outside of Diggs, it's been rough. Gabe Davis is not a number 2 receiver. In fact, he's not close. And yet they have been the number 1 scoring offense. That is because of the dual threat, the overwhelming stress that Josh Allen puts on a defense. The Bills have been the number 1 third down offense 3 times. The only other year they were third. Again, it is that insane short down rushing ability of Josh Allen, and he executes through the air consistently in these big spots. He's done all that without great talent alongside him. You want to look at the list of players with 4,000 passing yards, 500 rushing yards, and 40 total touchdowns in a season. Russell Wilson did it once. Let's applaud for Russ. What an incredible accomplishment. Josh Allen has done it the last 3 seasons. That's the list right there. And you mentioned the playoff numbers. Since 2020, 326 yards per game, 26 touchdowns, 5 turnovers. The Bills have scored 28 points per game. He is a GOAT-level, one-man offensive engine who's only gotten better in the playoffs. And we're just sitting here waiting, Logan. We're just sitting here waiting for the day that everybody gets their heads out of their asses and they all learn to appreciate that. It is so similar to me to the feeling that I had with Nikola Jokic when I was telling everybody, guys, this dude's the best player alive. This guy's the best offensive center that we've ever seen. And everybody was saying, oh, he's not top 5. He can't play defense. Oh, what has he done in the playoffs? Like, it's just the inability to separate. Does that guy have a championship from has that guy been brilliant in the postseason and the regular season both? Is that guy a generational, all-time sort of offensive engine? And you just wait for the breakthrough. You wait for the year that the right pieces are around them. You wait for the year that the dudes around them stop actively fucking up. You know, let's get the right amount of dudes on the field when we're trying to block a field goal. Let's have our kicker make a field goal when we have a chance to go to overtime. Let's fire our completely idiotic offensive coordinator. Instead of having Monte Morris and Austin Rivers in the backcourt and Facundo Campazzo, you know, what if we got healthy Jamal Murray and KCP? Like, I'm just waiting for the Josh Allen equivalent of that moment because I know it's coming. There's no doubt in my mind. This dude is number 2, and he's number 2 by a clear bit. And the only reason he's number 2 is because the number 1 is the best player to ever play football. And I want to be clear. I don't think Josh has an argument as the best playoff performer ever. It's Patrick Mahomes. So I disagree with your take there. I know that got the people fired up. I loved the sentiment of it. I just thought you took it 20% too far there because Pat is one of one. And Pat has just been better over the course of his playoff career. Josh has been amazing. Pat has been better. I also don't think you can call it 1A and 1B. I think Pat is 1. I think Josh is 2. But I think he is clearly and undeniably 2. And it's just insane, man. That's not to say, by the way, that Josh couldn't be a bit more careful with the football. Sometimes he does have turnovers that are backbreaking. I just think it's overblown. Again, you talk about how small the disparity was between him and Burrow over 2 years, and yet it's all people talk about with one guy. Meanwhile, everybody praises Burrow for taking care of the football. I think that's part of it. And the other thing is, when has it ever prevented the Bills from being a top 3 offense in football year after year after year, which nobody else has replicated like he has, even without elite talent? When has it ever come back to bite them in the playoffs? You know, this football that is apparently the reason that we hold Josh back, even though that's when he's played his best, because people apparently don't understand the concept of defense and special teams and these other things that impact a football game, and just going up against the best player ever, going toe-to-toe with him, and just not having your team execute at the same level, or even having Mahomes be 5% better than you, like he was this year. But Josh still played him better than anybody else in football could have. It's just ridiculous. It's all ridiculous to me. And we're just waiting for the day, Logan. Waiting for the day when everybody wakes up. And then it becomes, oh, so obvious. Then it's like, obviously he's always been this level. Oh, Jokic, yeah, of course. Well, now we have to hold him to the standard of being by far the best player on the planet that we all knew that he was. I'm waiting for you all to pivot like that on Josh. And when it does, I will be laughing. And I will clip this exact moment. And I will say, I knew this was coming because I did and I do at this very moment. And watch, people have been talking about the downfall of the Bills. Because they lost Stephon Diggs. Because they lost their safeties. Watch them win 12 games again, man. It doesn't matter. You put Josh Allen out there, you win double-digit games. And you can only say that about Patrick Mahomes.
When he does inevitably break through, it is going to be like that, Carson. I wholeheartedly agree. It is going to be a complete 180. Everyone's going to act like we always knew it was like this. And also, I want to predict something else that's going to happen during this regular season. There's going to be weeks. There's going to be a week, a game or 2 or 3 where Josh has 2 turnovers.
Absolutely.
People are going to use that as ammo to say that's why he can't be top 5. That's why he can't. The takes are going to get dumb. That's what we do every football season because we're so focused on 1 week of football. And I'm not saying I'm not. Sometimes I'm a victim of the moment too, man. We all are. It happens, dude, right? But it's like Josh to me is the one who always just somehow gets criticized more by prisoners of the moment than any other quarterback in the NFL. And that's
100%.
why it's so frustrating with Josh Allen discourse, because they're going to use that as undeniable ammo that's why Josh can't be top 3, or that's why Josh can't, or he's not on this level. It's going to get dumb.
5 turnovers in 9 playoff starts since 2020 with 26 touchdowns and 326 yards
in the most meaningful games of his career. That's
plays
what he's
out
done.
of his mind. I saw somebody say the other day that he stat padded against the 2021 Pats. The 2021 Pats, who were the number 2 scoring defense in football, one of the best defenses that we've seen in the last 15 years. Brother, if you can throw 5 touchdowns against them, go ahead, be my guest. Nobody else is doing that. That's just a generational quarterback going to work. It's crazy. People called Jokic a stat patter. Why? Based on nothing. Based on nothing. Because people don't know what they're talking about, Logan. That's why. And we move on, and we move beyond that. Josh is generational.
The only guy who's arguably more generational is...
No argument. He is. He's more.
Mr. Mahomes. Number 1, I'm just going to quickly read through some numbers. We've talked enough about Mahomes. 6 seasons as a starter, 6 title game appearances, 4 Super Bowl appearances, 3 Super Bowl championships. Number 1 passer rating by a quarterback in the playoffs. Number 1 completion percentage by a quarterback in the playoffs. Number 2 passing TDs per game by a QB in the playoffs. Number 4 passing yards per game by a quarterback in the playoffs. Taking this to a scope wider than the playoffs in the regular season, number 2 passing yards by a quarterback in their first 7 seasons, Peyton Manning. Number 2 passing touchdowns by a quarterback in their first 7 seasons. Thank you for leapfrogging the lead there, Carson. Did not play in his first season. Yeah. He's number 2 in passing TDs by a quarterback, just to Marino. Didn't play in his first year. And guess what? Those margins are really, really slim, man. Mahomes almost has both of those records despite not playing. Second highest winning percentage by a quarterback in NFL history. Minimum 2 seasons started. Only to the great Otto Graham. He is the Grim Reaper. He is the NFL's final boss. He is the dragon that needs to be slain en route to a Super Bowl. And as you said, he's the greatest football player I have ever watched play the game, right? We can talk about legacy. When we were talking about ability, Patrick Mahomes has the greatest peak of any single player I've ever seen. And if we were doing a NFL redraft, if you had every quarterback, every player in NFL history, there is no doubt in my mind that Patrick Mahomes would be the round 1, number 1 overall pick by a football team. And the last thing that I want to do to emphasize this, everybody said when he lost Tyreek Hill, all the downfall's coming. Everybody said the downfall was going to come this last year. And this was the worst regular season we've seen by a Patrick Mahomes-led team. They went 10-6. That's the Chiefs cratering, 10-6.
And Logan Camden picked them to win the Super Bowl going into the playoffs.
Still, I didn't get it. The best quarterback talent I'd ever seen, I said this at the time. I clipped this on social media. You can go and watch it. You gave the best talent I've ever seen in NFL history, the second best defense in football. That seems like an easy recipe for success, and that's what I want to emphasize. He's still been successful in spite of his weapons. Yes, he has a Hall of Famer in Travis Kelce. Yeah. Yes, he has a really good receiver in Rashee Rice. The guys outside of him are Justin Watson, MVS, Noah Gray, Sky Moore. He had Kadarius Toney giving away football games. They've added Hollywood Brown. I don't know what to expect out of the rookie Xavier Worthy. He's really fast, but that guy's really
They've
tiny.
Got speed now.
Maybe they'll scheme some things up. Mahomes is number 1. There's no debate for anybody else.
I think he's going to have a much better regular season than last year because some of the picks last year were just fluky 100%. And there's just more dynamism now. Hollywood and Worthy are going to inject that speed that just opens things up downfield because, Toney was like their dynamic playmaker in space. The only problem was he could not catch and hold on to the football. So there's no question. He is, in terms of American sports, easily the best athlete that I've ever seen. I mean, I just think his peak clears everybody else. I think that, and listen, cross-sport comparisons don't work, but it clears peak MJ, it clears peak LeBron. Like, just the absolute dominance and perfection of the sport, it's one of one. And listen, I put like Wayne Gretzky on my Mount Rushmore of sports because I absolutely think his resume is just got to be there, right? The gap between him and everybody else is objectively the biggest. But when I'm talking about the American sports, I'm really talking about football and basketball. If I were to name my GOAT in terms of peak between those two sports, it's Patrick Mahomes. We've just never seen anybody do it like him. He is the most physically gifted quarterback that we have ever seen. And he is also a football genius. And when it comes down to it, he just executes perfectly. And we were talking about it with Josh, right? I think that there is just this misconception that these dudes who have this home run hitting arm talent always just want to hit the home run. And Pat is a surgical genius. Josh is not on his level, but Josh, when it comes down to it, is really, really good at just picking defenses apart, and he doesn't make mistakes in the big moments, as we've discussed. But Pat's on another level, man. It's just perfection. Playoff careers, 41 touchdowns to 8 picks, and you just have this feeling that he's not going to lose. It's different from Brady. Because Brady never had the ability to just do the, like, what the fuck? How did you do that? On top of knowing that he's never going to make a mistake when it matters. Because Pat doesn't. People can talk about interception numbers in the last couple regular seasons. When it comes down to the playoffs, Pat is 13 touchdowns to 1 interception over the last 2 years with 2 Super Bowl wins and 0 Tyreek Hill, man. There's no comparison. Flawless. Football perfection. Completely unparalleled, and that's really all that there is to say about it. But some people might argue Tua Tagovailoa. Logan, what do you think? Anybody arguing Tua for number 1 over Pat?
Dude, I don't know if Tua would be in my top 20
Let's invent an
QBs.
imaginary enemy that we can get angry at.
I don't know if I'd Tua in my top 20 QBs.
I would strangle anybody who would have Tua over Pat Mahomes. People did have Tua over Josh, though. Remember that? That was common. That was damn near 50-50.
Week three last year, because you guys lost you had the Jets loss on the punt return. That was a stupid game.
Yeah, that sucked. Josh played terribly in that game.
Yeah, no, for sure. But everybody out the woodworks, Tua is so much better than Josh Allen.
Oh, it was
Tua is
awesome.
so much better.
Oh, it was so awesome. Okay, do you want to talk at all about not having Tua and Purdy on this list just because I feel like in terms of production, they're the two who everybody's going to look at?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I wouldn't. Purdy's closer to this list than Tua for sure. Let me pull up my extensive list here. Yeah, I think I would have Murray is a really close omission for me, as is Hurts, as is Goff. Then you're probably looking at Purdy, Caleb Williams, Baker Mayfield territory. I'm already ready to put Caleb there. I think Caleb's going to have a phenomenal rookie season.
I think he's going to be insane.
Tua is, I mean, like, people can take this however they want. I really don't care. This is how I feel about these quarterbacks. Tua to me is closer to the Russell Wilson, Geno Smith tier of quarterbacks.
Well, Geno's better. Geno's a lot better than Russ.
I'd probably take Russ over Geno.
Oh, you and your Steelers revision, bro. Oh, my God. You have flipped on Russell Wilson so hard this offseason. You were leading the charge. Russ is washed. Russ is washed. Russ is washed. Now, this is a Hall of Fame quarterback we have here.
It's a different situation, man. It's a different situation.
No, but Geno's just so much more of a creator.
Geno's not that good, man.
Geno's pretty good.
I don't know what Geno Smith you watch on a game-to-game basis. Geno is
good.
An average quarterback.
Oh, he's an average starting quarterback, sure, because the quarterback position is loaded. Russell Wilson is clearly a below-average starting quarterback.
I think
Russell Wilson is somewhere in the 20s. How can you say that? How can you say that Russ is as good as Geno having watched the last 2 years of football?
Would you take Baker or Geno?
I would take Geno.
I'm taking Baker, man.
Racist! That is so racist!
What?
Dude, that is so racist. This is like
Baker,
people who want Drew Lock to start over Geno. Racists!
I don't believe that.
I'm just kidding, Logan. I know that you're not racist. You just love your quirked up white boy Baker Mayfield, but I disagree with that take.
I would take
But Baker is clearly better than Russ, to be clear. That's much more of a conversation than Geno versus Russ.
Back to the original conversation, though. Against those guys, would you take Brock or would you take Jared Goff?
Ooh, that's so close. That's so close. Probably Goff just by the tiniest bit. I think that Goff is the better arm talent, obviously. Brock is the better mover, play extender, and I think that they have a similar capacity to do dumb shit every once in a while. They're neck and neck for me.
They are exactly next to each other on my list. Would you take Tua or Goff?
I mean, these three are right next to each other for me.
Really? Because for me, there's a little gap before I get to Tua.
I think that you can sometimes underrate how insane Tua's accuracy and timing in the pocket within structure is. Because that dude, he can just dot people up in stretches. But the reason he can't be in the top 10 to me is like when things break down at all.
He has nothing.
It's brutal.
He's
useless. Is brutal. He lacks the mobility. He lacks the arm talent. And then he starts to panic. And he starts to have those bad turnovers. So maybe I would lean Goff over him just because of that, just because Goff can cut through some adversity with his arm talent, whereas Tua has consistently crumbled when things get real like that. But Tua's a really good regular season quarterback. It's just when it comes down to I need you to do something out of structure against an elite defense, I do not believe in him whatsoever.
Would you take Baker or Brock?
I think I would take Brock. Maybe he's a situation merchant there, but I don't know. Baker's had a really good year. But we've definitely seen some boneheaded moments from Baker, a fair share.
I'd take Brock,
but
too.
To everybody who's saying, well, why isn't Brock on this list? I like Brock. I just think, again, he does still have his moments where he gets reckless with the football. He's a clearly below average NFL arm talent. He's an above average athlete at the quarterback position. His production is fantastic, but what I will always remind people of is the Jimmy G conversations we had, because Jimmy G is towards the top of the all-time rankings in all the efficiency stats. Yards per attempt, he is top 5 all-time. Winning percentage up there, which is a team success stat. Product of the team.
Guess what?
Passer rating, Jimmy is way up there. And Brock is better. Brock is better in all those stats because Brock is better than Jimmy G, but Jimmy G actually sucks is the thing. And Brock is solid and slightly above average. But Jimmy G still looked like an elite quarterback if you were just going to look at the numbers because he played for the San Francisco 49ers with Kyle Shanahan, best offensive mind in football, and a stacked arsenal of offensive weapons.
If you just go minimum 25 games played, which is exactly what Brock has played, Brock has the highest winning percentage in NFL history, and that's why people will always fight for him to be on lists like this. I just think there's a little bit of a talent gap. I do agree with you. I think
Baby
Brock's
Brady,
above
people
average.
will say.
I wouldn't mind having Brock as my starting quarterback.
No.
He's very, very solid.
Certainly better than Russell Wilson.
I just think yeah. No, I mean that's clear. Yeah, that one's obvious. But
God, what is your
I just
deal
think
with
there's a little
Geno?
talent gap.
What is your deal with Geno?
I don't know. I mean, the Steelers.
Okay, what about
games-
Baker versus Russ? I know you would rather have Baker than Russ.
I'd rather have Baker. Yes.
Yeah, thank God.
I don't know. Maybe I'm biased, but every game I've seen Geno play against the Steelers, he has got eaten alive.
Oh, this dude with the Steelers.
He's gotten eaten alive by the Steelers.
This dude with the Steelers. This is like what you always say about Lamar. I'll say something
Lamar gets
about
eaten
Lamar,
alive
and then
by
you're
the
just like,
Steelers.
yeah, but he gets eaten alive by Pittsburgh, so what does it matter? Geno's good, man. He's got a live arm. He can move pretty well. He's accurate.
He's okay.
Sometimes he turns the ball over.
He is average, man.
That's fine as a starting quarterback, which makes him better than Russell Wilson.
No.
Russell Wilson is so clearly below average, Logan. He is immobile. He has been inaccurate, and he is like one of the most limited athletes and creators in football. The Broncos offense only became capable when they said, Russ, don't do anything. We're just going to run the football 40 times a game now.
We will revisit this conversation.
2 years ago,
2022,
2022, Geno played like a top 10 sort of quarterback. Russ was the worst starting quarterback in football. Last year, Russ got a bit better. Geno got a bit worse. It did not make up that gap.
We're going to revisit this conversation.
We'll revisit it, man. We'll revisit it. If Russ has Brandon Ayuk, we'll see. He'll probably find a way to mess that up, too. All right, everybody. Hope you enjoyed. Football season is here. Let's go! That really sunk in. Yesterday, I was like, holy shit. I'm a few weeks away from getting to glaze Josh Allen every single week. Let's go. I cannot wait. And I know that you guys can't wait. So tune in, baby. The division-by-division previews are coming. And football is coming fast. We're not forgetting about the NBA. Don't worry. I'm going to be doing some historical content. We'll still have some trivia. Maybe we'll have a couple more NBA lists. But it's football season now, so lock in, ladies and germs. If you want more of our content, it is all across our YouTube channel, all of our full shows, the aforementioned historical content, video essays, that will be on our YouTube channel, trivia with some awesome guests that we've been having on our YouTube channel. Let's just run through the roster of the summer, Logan. It's remarkable. We start with Hive Mind. Then we go to Stay Hot. Then we go to, who was next? I don't know. I'm just going to run through all the names that we've had. Pick a Side, BDGE, Jokic Joestar, Impalo Escobar, Kofi and OG. And I think that's everybody. I mean, that's just a murderer's row.
Stacked.
And we did trivia with all of them. So that's on our YouTube channel. It's also across audio platforms. Listen wherever you want. Follow us across social, TikTok at NerdSesh. See clips from the show. See all of our trivia content. Instagram at NerdSesh. Twitter at Nerd_Sesh. If you want to follow us on Twitch, you can see me streaming my NCAA 25 football dynasty with the Cal Bears, often at 3 a.m. Brazil time. We get going in the wee hours of the night, and we go to work, baby. We're building the dynasty. Good times, good vibes. Feel free to join. You can also join our Discord for some good vibes and good times. The link to that is at the link tree across our social media bios. And you can check out our merch. If you want that nice hat sitting on top of Logan's head, that is at thevolume.com. So, with that, as always, appreciate you guys. Football season is coming. I've been Carson Brabber.
I've been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.